Okay, welcome back. It's early May 1864. This is going to be a relatively brief video. It's just a business report. It's really just an update to look at some of our kind of colonial economic developments and also to address some of the changes in the geopolitical situation. So in terms of our economy, we've now got railroads that stretch all the way down to Baghdad. That's well ahead of when the Ottoman Empire really had that. And really within a couple of months, you'd be able to travel in the Ottoman Empire from Sarajevo to Baghdad or Judea. Which is, pretty remarkable stuff to have achieved that this early. We're looking to exploit some of these kind of smaller towns that exist between the major cities to try and ensure that we don't have, huge amounts of kind of concentration of industry should a particular city be affected by a strike or some kind of civil unrest. We want to make sure that we have our productive forces a bit more kind of evenly distributed. So to that end, in Lancashire, we've got a canned goods factory being constructed. In Bursa, we've had a canned goods factory for some time. And we continue to build up Sinop as a major city, I should say. Actually, we've got an ammunition shop being constructed in Sinop, and just a traditional manufactured goods factory in Smyrna. Incidentally, also, we had in 1850, I think we only had two factories. We had a furniture factory, of course, in Constantinople. And we also had a canned goods factory in Smyrna. Now, Constantinople is built up into a really serious industrial city now, on parity with a place like London or New York or somewhere like this. It's a big, big industrial city. And we've got pretty good bonuses in this region in terms of production efficiency. It's a very well-developed region. We have fairly popular enthusiasm for the regime for the time being in Constantinople. And we want to kind of make the most of that. And furniture factories just produce manufactured goods, but they just produce them in a relatively small number. This reflects the fact that it's a very specific kind of manufactured good. And they require timber, which you don't have a huge amount of access to timber in the Ottoman Empire. In fact, the only RGO that we have, the only region for the time being, is in Genina in Greece. We have that exploited, but there's no railroads, so we have a kind of logging or commercial forestry, if you like, but it produces 3 units per fortnight, and we're really dependent on imports to support furniture production. So to that end, I've actually for the first time, destroyed a factory, if you like. Didn't close it, just destroyed the factory, but instantly began in its replacement the construction of a luxury goods shop that consumes some manufactured goods and in turn produces luxury goods, which are a really high yield item. So a little bit of economic restructuring in Constantinople. In the kind of interior then, really, we have the completion now of a manufactured goods factory. This is the first factory really that we've built other than Salonika outside of kind of western and central Anatolia. So that's complete. That's got a relatively decent efficiency. It's got railroad access, and that churns out 6 units per fortnight. Also, we've just laid the construction in Baghdad of a textile factory. That'll be the last textile factory for some time, but we are kind of a textile producing heavyweight. In fact, if we have a look, it always feels like we're producing more than we are. So we're kind of 4th, really. We rank 4th. Although these other kind of places like Parana, for example, they tend to accumulate a large amount of a certain commodity, then unload it onto the market. We consistently export 15 units per turn. That's only 4 units less than the United States. The United States produces about 19 units per turn, or at least exports 19 units. So that's pretty good. And beyond that, North Germany is the biggest exporter at 29 units per turn. But as I say, that can be a little bit variable. But yeah, I mean, considering that the Ottoman Empire would have been considered a complete backwater in the 1860s, for us to be sort of, listed as one of the principal exporters of textiles in the world, we'll sort of chalk that up as a win. So yeah, pretty sound economic development. And in terms of the line that stretches up to Sarajevo, we're really just, a fortnight away now. And that will be a qualitative change for Sarajevo, really linking it up properly into the empire. Some years ago we built a collection point in Sarajevo, so it's no longer a localized economy. And we continue to build up the fortress then. And since January, we've released a significant package of state funds, manufactured goods, and various kinds of things needed to continue the upgrade of fortifications in the Balkan Peninsula. So that we're continuing to release a lot of resources to sort of militarize the Balkan Peninsula, because of course in the last 14 years we have had 3 wars against powers that have ambitions in the Balkan Peninsula. So we're continuing that process. We've been I say we haven't increased the size of our army by about 200,000 because we decommissioned a number of significant forces, but we've kind of transferred them into professional garrison forces. These forces are now quite considerable. We've got gun emplacements in Constanta. Constanta is a large fortress. It's currently in the process of being upgraded. I believe. Let me double check that. No, I beg your pardon. The upgrade of Constanta is complete. So that is now a large modern fortress with a significant garrison. That would be a really, really tough city to take. Plevna is in the process of being turned into a modern fortress. Again, we've got a pretty large professional standing garrison. These garrisons will be complemented in the event of a siege by the arming of the local population and some bureaucrats and civil servants. So all of these cities will kind of represent armies of about 100 to 150,000 men. They are static, but also with the upgrade of our army, if you like, the kind of army reform that we've seen over the last month, these garrison units are much, much more effective. Not breech-loading rifles, muzzle-loading rifles really increase the range of these garrison fortresses, and it's a real game changer. So it's in a future war, I don't think we're going to be in a situation where it's going to be very easy for opponents to kind of take these positions. Bulgaria continues its upgrade. Salonika is complete now. We're looking to increase the size of the garrison in Salonika, and Sarajevo is continuing to be expanded. So we're going for a second phase of expansion in Sarajevo. Then we're going to be looking for an upgrade to a modern fortress. And in a fortnight, once this is linked up, we're going to start shuttling in various kind of fortress divisions, gun emplacements that we've had kind of patiently built in the interior. And that will make Sarajevo almost an impregnable fortress. Sarajevo is some way off. We have still got to release a lot more funds for Sarajevo. So we're going to be, probably in 2 years' time, Sarajevo will be a very large, very modern fortress, probably on parity with something like Constantinople or Adrianople. So yeah, a lot of resources have been ploughed into this. So I really hope it kind of pays dividends. You know, probably over the last year or so, I reckon about a third of all of our state revenue has been ploughed into this, and maybe something like a quarter of all the manufactured goods in the Ottoman Empire have been devoted to supporting this militarization process. It's a really big project, and it's counterintuitive because we're not really expanding the army that much. You know, in terms of the number of boots on the ground, all we're really doing is decommission forces and converting them into fortress troops, but also with gun emplacements and things like this, and improving the actual fortifications themselves, the structures themselves. So it's an expensive process, but I think it's going to pay dividends in the long run. That's the hope anyway. So beyond that, in terms of kind of colonial business, well, Zanzibar to the south is now a protectorate of the Ottoman Empire. We can actually find Zanzibar. It's sort of on the east coast of Africa. So this is really our kind of first toehold in an area that is kind of fairly ahistorical. The Ottomans didn't actually have much of an interest in Zanzibar. I don't think we get any prestige or anything for it. That's not even the right kind of Ministry of Colonial Affairs. Not yet, anyway. One thing that tends to happen is the prestige that you get for these things. It's almost as though kind of the appetite comes with the eating. Once you plough resources and consolidate the region, and it becomes a colony, you then do actually acquire some prestige for it. It's not really revealed to begin with. But yeah, Zanzibar's not marked yet, but it is within our sphere of influence, which is... Yeah, sphere of influence, there we go. So we've got a flag planted, it's a protectorate. And we've already begun the construction of an anchorage in Zanzibar. We've got a trade post mission, we've got a consulate built. So the only way that Zanzibar is going to someone else now is on the basis of open military conflict with the Ottoman Empire. That is what another power have to do. They're not going to be able to sneak in there. It's a bit of a toehold. The other thing we're looking to do is to now develop our position on the Somalian coastline. It looks like the locals here are not fans of the Italians. They've gone into some sort of fisticuffs with Piedmont Sardinia. That's making it really hard for Piedmont Sardinia to get a toehold here now. Whatever they've done, they've rubbed the locals up the wrong way. We're much better placed to position ourselves in Somalia and Somaliland because the Yemen is now being really, really consolidated. Really, everything kind of west of this kind of line, trying to name the region now, the Gaida line, is pretty much consolidated. We've got military formations in every single territory. Hodeidah, we're gradually developing military control over this region. We're playing various kind of colonial cards to suppress the revolt risk, forces now. We have substantial forces in the ground now. We're able to comb through local settlements, seize kind of suspicious-looking people and this kind of thing, and I guess kind of put them in some sort of internment camp or something. We have got more forces en route. This is just a brigade, a militia brigade. The purpose of the militia brigade is to really sit in Aden itself and release this division, which is going to press into Makala. That will then free up Bayezid Pasha to conduct really the closing operations. We hope the closing operations of what has been a really long and tough colonial insurgency. But, the inexorable kind of process of colonization is now happening. And it's inconceivable now that the Yemenis are going to be able to turn the tide. And yeah, it's been a long time coming. The good thing with this is it means that we have substantial forces on the tip of the Arabian Peninsula, which will be well placed to kind of intervene in the Horn of Africa, support, for example, what could be a colonial revolt in Somalia. The problem with the local Somalis having kind of chased off the Italians is it may give them notions that they can do that with us, and that is simply not the case. So we have sort of muscle in the area, if you like, that we can kind of utilize, intervene. We're probably going to make a landing at Mogadishu at some point, begin the construction of a colonial fortress, and do at Mogadishu kind of what we did really with Aden, which is to say, build an anchorage, build a traditional kind of fortress, really kind of, get kind of dug in there, and then use that as the basis for expansion. We don't have prospecting teams yet. I'm not sure if the Ottomans ever have access to prospecting teams with new technologies. Not prospecting teams, expedition teams. Expedition teams are really what are required to kind of reveal. I don't think we have any colonial cards. Yeah, we don't have any colonial kind of options available to explore terra incognita, which is a shame. So we're either dependent on others to do it. It kind of means that long term we'd never be able to really fully consolidate the Arabian Peninsula, at least the interior of the Arabian Peninsula, because this would just be treated as an area that we don't know enough about. It's completely removed really from our kind of tentacles. Europeans do have the ability, at least for now, they're always going to have the ability to kind of sort of prospect and explore these kinds of regions. And they may become revealed to us on the basis of other powers doing this. So, yeah, it is what it is. We can see that some prospecting, for example, in kind of Portuguese Angola, again, not prospecting, actually exploration. Also, Kinshasa, the Belgians have managed to kind of explore the area, Kinshasa, and lay the foundations for the Heart of Darkness and all that sort of thing. But we are getting a good toehold, a good kind of toehold in the Horn of Africa, which is going to be a bit of a project for us now, and a bit of a focal point. And that really brings me to kind of geopolitics. So Austria's continuing its war with Russia. It's doing a lot better than it was. It's recaptured some of its territories in the Carpathians. It's managed to get a kind of, it looks like it's besieging Podolia. So it's actually now in kind of, if you like, sort of western Ukraine. And we can see kind of signs of looting and pillaging in other territories, which suggests that maybe some Russian forces have penetrated behind the lines. Maybe they've got kind of raiding Cossack forces, something like that. But the Austrians have managed to kind of salvage the situation, but the war is ongoing, which is important for us. Now, of course, we have been entertaining the idea of getting some kind of force concentration this year, maybe, in Bosnia, and looking to conduct a kind of a fast operation to take Vienna and use that as the basis maybe to dismantle the Austrian Empire. Since we kind of, the last video in January, in addition to the war with Russia, the Austrian Empire is now at war with Britain. They had a kind of diplomatic crisis. I think it was initiated by Austria, so Austria has technically declared war on Britain, which is pretty unforeseen. And it's, I mean, I can't see sort of how Austria is going to come out of this situation very well. But, I mean, Britain may not intervene much with land forces. Britain might just satisfy itself with kind of sealing Austria off, stopping it from being able to trade or anything like that, which would inflict further damage on the Austrian economy. Now, in the immediate aftermath of that declaration of war, Austria's declaration of war on Britain as a result of a diplomatic crisis, Prussia has guaranteed the independence of Austria. Now, that doesn't mean that Prussia goes to war with Russia or Britain, but it does mean that they will not countenance the idea of anyone else taking advantage of this situation and moving against Austria. That puts paid to our plan to conduct a fast sort of operation against Vienna. The reason being is because we would only have considered a war with Austria on the basis that it was a fairly brief war in terms of the actual combat anyway, and it would be well positioned to fairly comfortably hold the kind of center of the Austrian Empire, allow really kind of victory points to kind of clock up, and then put us in a really, really strong position at the conference table once we initiated negotiations. That's no longer the case, because our occupation of Vienna will now be countered, or is likely to be countered. It's not an automatic mechanical thing. Prussia may not back Austria, maybe bluff. If they don't, they lose a lot of prestige. They get a casus belli against us, and they lose prestige if they don't act upon that guarantee. But there's a good chance they probably will follow up on it, I suspect. And of course, we would then have to fight the Prussian army in central Austria. There's no point in that. Prussia has a first-rate army, and it can also conscript a very large army, despite the fact that it looks like a relatively small state. In the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, Prussia was able to bring a good 500,000 men to bear against the French army of about 300,000. So the Prussians are very effective, very adept at getting forced concentration during this period. And I mean, this is really, throughout the 1860s and the early 1870s, as the world learns, the Prussian army is the sort of premier military force of the European continent. We don't know whether in our parallel universe that is also the case, but I don't want to roll the dice on it, not least because we just fought a touch-and-go war against Austria. Now, upon realizing that, I thought, well, there's always Russia. We could go to war with Russia. Why not? We could see some of the Southern Caucasus, Sevastopol, Odessa, and then try and impose some kind of harsh terms. But the reality is, these are not really significant victory locations for the Russians. It would take a long time to hold these regions to impose any kind of peace deal on the Russians that would be really worth going to war with them. And then what kind of peace deal would it be? I mean, at most we'd get maybe Georgia to be made independent or something like that, but I think that's really unlikely. I don't think that's something that, it's unlikely that the Russians would accept that. And it'd be madness to go to war with Russia. We're never going to occupy Moscow or St. Petersburg. We're never going to get to the political heart of Russia. So we're never going to be able to impose really harsh terms. Russia is not a power that is, well suited to a quick, fast kind of war with a really nice kind of quick, desirable outcome. So that's not going to happen. It'd be madness to do. We've not long finished a pretty protracted war with Austria, which was a really touch and go kind of fight, which cost us a good 500,000 men at least. And we should really make the most of this. The fact that Austria and Russia are fighting each other gives us a significant amount of elbow room to focus on economic development, scientific research, the application of some kind of technologies also to industry, and this gives us a chance to catch up. If we were at war with Austria or Russia, we wouldn't be able to have kind of twin investments in different areas of research. We're focusing on ironcladding warships and breech-loaded rifles. Incidentally, I watched something on YouTube that, just by absolute coincidence, about breech-loaded rifles in the Franco-Prussian War, the Chassepot and the Dracer rifles. I had no idea that the first breech-loaded rifles had paper cartridges. I didn't even know that existed. I mean, I know that in the old kind of muzzle-loaded, muskets, you had paper and wadding and all this sort of thing, whatever it's called. But yeah, they were actually paper shells, the very first ones. But how about that? But anyway, I think really we're not going to be conducting any kind of offensive wars. Wars will come to the Ottoman Empire. Our principal focus is to hold on to what we've got in terms of Europe anyway, defend ourselves when we have to, consolidate the interior, which we're in the process of doing. Incidentally, we've managed to get 2 colonial cards being played in Qatar and Kuwait that have evaded us. These are colonial cards that are prone to kind of not work, which is to say military expedition, pacify. So it's using military units to patrol and watch over the natives or reduce overall risk. The problem is this is not a kind of card that you play that guarantees success. It's not one of those things that always happens. It's like a 50-50 thing. We kept playing it and they didn't come off. It's the only thing that we have left that could function to drive up colonial penetration in these regions. A change from 2%, they can't go beyond 50%. We need, in fact, we need 50 in either of these regions to push for formal colonial status. The hope is that when these colonial moves are played out, these military expeditions, which require units in the area to actually conduct this, it also requires some replacements and some material that's sent to the region. The hope is that we'll be in a position to move for formal colonial status in Kuwait, if not also Qatar. So that's an exciting development, and that begins the process then of actually properly consolidating the interior, converting this area from an area that is within our sphere of influence, an area that we have a significant amount of involvement in, to an area that is formally integrated into the Ottoman Empire. So Kuwait looks like probably in 5 turns that's going to be on the cards for that to be happening, and quite possibly also Qatar. So that's an exciting development. Beyond that, that's pretty much it. You know, we're occasionally releasing funds for kind of bribing operations in the Hejaz. Again, just looking to involve ourselves on a local level more and more, if we can, in the affairs of the Hejaz. We've got pretty good colonial penetration across the board. It's not enough yet. It's really the kind of provinces in Medina, despite the fact that we have limited military control of the surrounding area of Medina, we've got 55% colonial penetration. What we need to do is the provinces that we're sort of languishing at sort of 30, often 35. We need to get this up to an average of about 40% colonial penetration. On that basis, Hejaz can then be moved to full colonial status and follow where kind of Libya went, really, to be properly integrated into the Ottoman Empire. So we occasionally release funds for that, and that is a work in progress. But we have seen an increase of about 3 or 4% colonial penetration across the board in the Hejaz over the last sort of year or two. So that's good. It's a good sign. We are kind of getting there. The next area after Somalia is going to be to try and establish ourselves. You can see the Italians are looking to send colonial merchants to Massawa. Don't hold out too much hope for that yielding very much, because of course this area is controlled by Somalian kind of Sudanese kind of brigands. So we would need to really intervene and militarily impose ourselves on the coastline of Eritrea before we begin to play any kind of colonial cards. But we are going to be looking to do that also. So Eritrea, Somaliland, and Somalia is going to be the beginning, really, the entry points into the Horn of Africa for us. And it means that we'll have a toehold, so that once the scramble for Africa really begins in earnest in the sort of 1880s, 1890s, decades from now, we like a lot of other powers, we're getting ourselves in a position that we can really kind of be a part of that. The Horn of Africa is an area that's a natural place for us, and possibly also Sudan itself. We are now seeing the expansion of, what is this? What territory is this? I'm trying to see what kind of region this is. Now, this is not the kind of state that we created. It's some other kind of tribal society or state. Darfur, I guess it's some sort of breakaway Sudanese kind of sultan or something like this. These guys have more control now than they've had, actually. This kind of breakaway sultanate. I'm guessing it is. It's Darfur. It's kind of southern Sudan. But anyway, they've actually acquired territory. I think a lot of these revolts are actually going over to this sultanate. That could make for an interesting kind of situation, actually. Let's have a look. Yeah, it is Darfur. It's Darfurian loyalty. Interesting. Anyway, yeah. So it looks like the kind of what passed for kind of Sudanese kind of polity is beginning to fracture. Huge parts of northern Sudan is controlled by rebels. It's an inherently unstable region. We've got 24% colonial penetration in Khartoum. The British are ahead of us in that game, and they're well established with a kind of mission. But we can play a few cards, I think, to begin to position ourselves in Khartoum, and we will do that. It'll become easier once we're established in kind of Eritrea, and we can begin to conduct some colonial military expeditions, really, to kind of secure this area, this northern part of Sudan. And Sudan would be a natural extension to the Horn of Africa also. And also, links up to contiguous territory in Egypt. Egypt is, to all extensive purposes, a kind of a protectorate, not in the colonial sense, but we have transit rights. Egypt obviously empties out most of its tax revenue into our state purse. But it has, it keeps 20% of its tax collection for the purpose of local police and stuff like that, and that's fine. We're happy with that. That's it anyway for May. I was about to say March, May 1864. Next video will pick up maybe late summer, early October, early autumn, something like that. I left it a little bit longer this video, so there'll probably be 3 reports for 64, unless anything significant happens that necessitates a kind of report back. So I'll leave it there for the time being. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.